Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Carla's hands trembled as she held the small, innocuous-looking pill between her fingers. She'd been waiting for this moment for months, saving every spare dollar she could to afford the experimental treatment. With a deep breath, she swallowed the pill dry, her throat constricting around it as it went down. At first, nothing happened. Carla paced the worn carpet, running her hands through her short, mousy brown hair. Had she been scammed? Was this all just a cruel joke? Then a tingling sensation began in her fingertips. It spread up her arms like wildfire, racing through her body until every nerve ending felt alive with electricity. Carla gasped, stumbling against the wall as a wave of dizziness washed over her. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear her vision. The room seemed different somehow. Taller? No, that wasn't right. Carla looked down at her hands and let out a startled cry. They were smaller, more delicate. The calluses from years of manual labor were fading before her eyes, leaving behind smooth, unblemished skin. A strange warmth blossomed in her chest, and Carla watched in fascination as the loose t-shirt she wore began to fill out. At the same time, she felt a curious lightness, as if gravity had lessened its hold. With a jolt, she realized she was shrinking. Her pants, once snug, now hung loosely on her hips. Carla scrambled to the full-length mirror propped against the wall, her heart pounding. The face staring back at her was both familiar and foreign. Her jawline had softened, cheekbones becoming more pronounced. As she watched, her nose reshaped itself, becoming smaller and more button-like. A tingling sensation on her scalp made her gasp. Carla's hair, once short and lifeless, began to grow at an alarming rate. Rich chestnut waves cascaded past her shoulders, framing her newly feminized face. "Oh my God," Carla whispered, her voice higher and softer than before. She reached up to touch her face, marveling at the changes. Her skin was smoother, pores seemingly vanished. Even her eyelashes seemed longer, framing her wide, expressive eyes. A sudden cramp in her thighs made Carla double over. She gritted her teeth against the pain, watching as her hips began to widen. The loose jeans slipped further down, revealing the curve of her expanding hips. At the same time, her waist seemed to cinch inward, creating an hourglass silhouette. As the cramps subsided, Carla straightened, taking in her new figure with wonder. She ran her hands down her sides, marveling at the soft curves that had replaced her once boxy frame. Carla couldn't stop staring at her reflection. She twirled, watching her new long hair swirl around her. A bubble of laughter escaped her lips, higher and more melodious than her old laugh. This was everything she'd ever dreamed of and more. She was so engrossed in examining her transformed body that she didn't hear the key turning in the lock. The door swung open, and a familiar voice called out, "Hey, I'm home early! You wouldn't believe the day I've had!" The words cut off abruptly. Carla whirled around, her new hair fanning out dramatically. Her roommate, Mark, stood frozen in the doorway, his mouth hanging open in shock. "Carla?" Mark's voice was barely above a whisper. Is that you?" Carla's heart raced. She hadn't planned for this. How could she explain? What would Mark think? 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind as she stood there, exposed in her new form. I can explain," Carla began, her new voice trembling slightly. Mark took a hesitant step into the apartment, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What happened to you? How is this even possible?" Carla took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "It's a long story," she said, gesturing for Mark to come in and close the door. "You might want to sit down for this." Mark moved as if in a trance, closing the door behind him and sinking onto the worn couch. His eyes never left Carla, taking in every detail of her transformed appearance. "I've been saving up for months," Carla began, pacing nervously. The unfamiliar sway of her new hips made her movements awkward. "There's this experimental treatment. I know it sounds crazy, but I had to try it." "Treatment?" Mark echoed, his brow furrowing. Carla, this is beyond treatment. You look like a completely different person. Carla nodded, a small smile playing on her lips despite her anxiety. That was kind of the point, she admitted. I've always felt wrong in my old body, like I was wearing a costume that didn't fit. This, she gestured to her new form. This feels right. Mark leaned back, running a hand through his hair. I had no idea, he said softly. Why didn't you tell me? Carla perched on the edge of the coffee table, facing her roommate. I was scared, she confessed. I didn't know how you'd react, and honestly, I wasn't sure it would even work. I didn't want to get my hopes up. A moment of silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, Mark leaned forward, his expression softening. Are you okay? He asked. I mean, physically. That kind of rapid change, it can't be easy on your body. Carla blinked, touched by his concern. I feel amazing, actually, she said. Better than I ever have. It's like everything finally clicked into place. Mark nodded slowly, processing this information. So, what happens now? He asked. I mean, legally speaking, your ID, your job, everything still has your old information, right? The question hit Carla like a bucket of cold water. In her excitement over the physical changes, she hadn't even considered the practical implications. Oh, God, she muttered, burying her face in her hands. I didn't think that far ahead. Mark stood up, crossing the small space to put a comforting hand on Carla's shoulder. Hey, it's okay, he said gently. We'll figure it out. One step at a time, all right? Carla looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. We, she repeated, her voice small and hopeful. Mark smiled, squeezing her shoulder. Of course, we're friends, aren't we? I'm not going to abandon you just because you look different now. Although, he added with a chuckle, I might need some time to get used to this new you. A wave of relief washed over Carla. She stood up impulsively, throwing her arms around Mark in a tight hug. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Mark hesitated for a moment before returning the hug, careful and a bit awkward with Carla's new form. Don't mention it, he said, but, you might want to change into some clothes that fit before we tackle anything else. Carla pulled back, suddenly acutely aware of how ill-fitting her old clothes were now. She laughed, the sound light and musical. Right, good idea. I'll be right back. As she headed to her room to find something more suitable, Carla felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The hard part, the physical transformation, was over. Now came the challenge of adapting to her new life. But with Mark's support, she felt ready to face whatever came next. Carla rummaged through her closet, pushing aside the baggy jeans and oversized t-shirts that had been her staples. At the back, hidden behind everything else, was a small collection of women's clothing she'd secretly purchased over the years. She'd never had the courage to wear them before, always afraid they'd look ridiculous on her male body. Now, though, she pulled out a simple sundress, soft blue fabric flowing through her fingers. With a deep breath, Carla slipped out of her old clothes and into the dress. She turned to the mirror in her room and gasped softly. For the first time in her life, the reflection matched the image she'd always had of herself in her mind. Carla twirled, watching the skirt flare out around her legs. A giggle escaped her lips, and she clapped a hand over her mouth, still not used to the higher pitch of her voice. She grabbed a pair of sandals, also purchased in secret, and slipped them on, marveling at how much smaller her feet had become. Taking a deep breath, Carla stepped out of her room. Mark, who had been pacing in the living room, stopped abruptly when he saw her. His eyes widened, taking in her appearance. Wow, he said softly. You look great, Carla. Carla felt a blush creep up her cheeks. Thanks, she murmured, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. It feels right, you know? Mark nodded, a small smile on his face. I can see that. You seem happier. More comfortable? I am, Carla agreed. She moved to sit on the couch, still getting used to the way her body moved now. So, what do we do first? Mark sat down next to her, his brow furrowed in thought. Well, I think we need to start with the basics. Your ID, social security, all that stuff. You'll need to legally change your name and gender marker. Carla nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. That sounds complicated. It probably will be, Mark admitted. But it's necessary. We should also think about your job. Are you planning to go back to work like this? The question made Carla's stomach churn. She worked as a mechanic at a local garage, a decidedly male-dominated field. How would her coworkers react to her transformation? I don't know, she said honestly. I love my job, but I'm not sure how everyone will take this. Mark leaned back, considering. Well, legally, they can't fire you for this, but I understand if you're worried about how they'll treat you. Carla nodded, twisting her hands in her lap. Maybe I could look for a new job. Start fresh somewhere nobody knows about. That's definitely an option, Mark agreed. But don't feel like you have to give up a job you love just because of other people's potential reactions. You have rights, Carla. The use of her name, her real name, in reference to her new self sent a thrill through Carla. She smiled, feeling a surge of confidence. You're right, I shouldn't let fear dictate my choices. I've come this far, right? Mark grinned, nudging her shoulder playfully. That's the spirit. Now how about we start with something a bit less daunting? We should probably get you some more clothes that fit, and maybe a haircut to style that new mane of yours. Carla ran her fingers through her long hair, marveling at the silky texture. A haircut sounds great, and shopping... She paused, a mixture of excitement and nervousness bubbling up inside her. I've never really gone shopping for women's clothes before. Not properly, anyway. Well, there's a first time for everything, Mark said, standing up. Come on, let's head to the mall. We can start building your new wardrobe and maybe grab some dinner while we're out. It'll be good for you to get used to being in public like this. Carla hesitated for a moment, anxiety flickering across her face. What if people stare or say something? Mark's expression softened. He reached out, offering his hand to help Carla up. Then we'll deal with it together. Remember, you haven't done anything wrong. You're just being yourself. Carla took a deep breath, then took Mark's hand, allowing him to pull her to her feet. You're right. Okay, let's do this. As they left the apartment, Carla felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. This was her first step into the world as her true self. Whatever happened, she knew she couldn't go back, and with Mark by her side, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The mall bustled with activity as Carla and Mark stepped through the automatic doors. The noise and movement seemed amplified to Carla, her senses still adjusting to her transformed body. She found herself instinctively moving closer to Mark, seeking the comfort of his familiar presence. You okay? Mark asked quietly, noticing her nervousness. Carla nodded, forcing a smile. Just a lot to take in, she admitted. Mark gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. We'll take it slow. How about we start with some basics? Jeans, t-shirts, that kind of thing? Sounds good, Carla agreed, grateful for his guidance. They made their way to a popular clothing store, its windows displaying mannequins in the latest fashions. As they entered, Carla felt a flutter of excitement mixed with her anxiety. This was something she'd dreamed about for years, shopping for clothes that truly fit her both physically and mentally. A sales associate approached them, her smile bright and professional. Can I help you find anything today? Carla froze, suddenly unsure how to respond. Mark smoothly stepped in. We're looking to update my friend's wardrobe. Basics to start with. Jeans, tops, maybe some dresses? The associate nodded, her gaze sweeping over Carla appraisingly. Of course. Let's start with finding your size. Would you like to try on a few things to get an idea of what fits best? Carla nodded, not trusting her voice. The associate led them to a section of the store filled with jeans in various styles and colors. "Why don't you pick out a few styles you like, and we'll find the right size," the associate suggested. Carla ran her hand over the soft denim, marveling at the variety. She'd never had so many options before. With Mark's encouragement, she selected a few pairs, skinny jeans, bootcut, and a high-waisted style that caught her eye. The associate directed them to the fitting rooms, handing Carla a numbered tag. "Just let me know if you need any other sizes or styles," she said with a smile before leaving them. Carla stepped into the fitting room, her heart pounding. This was it, the moment of truth. She slipped off her sundress and picked up the first pair of jeans, a dark wash-skinny style. To her amazement, they slid on easily. She stared at her reflection, turning this way and that. The jeans fit perfectly, accentuating her feminine figure in a way she'd only dreamed about before. "How's it going in there?" Mark called from outside. "It's amazing," Carla replied, her voice filled with wonder. "They fit perfectly." "Let's see then," Mark encouraged. Carla hesitated for a moment before opening the fitting room door. She stepped out, feeling exposed but exhilarated. Mark's eyebrows rose, a grin spreading across his face. "Wow, Carla, you look great." The sales associate, passing by with an armful of clothes, paused to look. "Those fit you beautifully," she commented. "The cut really suits your figure." Carla felt a blush creep up her cheeks, but she couldn't stop smiling. "Thank you," she said softly. Encouraged by this success, Carla tried on the other jeans, then moved on to tops and dresses. Each piece that fit well, each compliment from Mark or the sales associate, built her confidence. By the time they'd assembled a basic wardrobe, Carla felt more comfortable in her new skin than she ever had before. As they approached the checkout, Mark leaned in close. "You know," he said quietly, "we should probably get you some, undergarments, too. There's a lingerie store just down the way." Carla's eyes widened, a fresh wave of nervousness washing over her. "Oh, right, I hadn't even thought about that," Mark chuckled. "Yeah, I figured. Don't worry, I'll wait outside for that part, but you'll need it, especially with some of those tops we picked out." After paying for their purchases, they made their way to the lingerie store. True to his word, Mark waited outside, giving Carla an encouraging thumbs up as she entered alone. The store was a sea of lace, satin, and cotton in every color imaginable. Carla stood just inside the entrance, feeling overwhelmed. A middle-aged woman with a kind face approached her. "First time shopping for lingerie?" she asked gently. Carla nodded, grateful for the woman's perceptiveness. "Is it that obvious?" The woman laughed warmly. "We all start somewhere, dear. Come on, let's get you measured and find some comfortable everyday pieces to start with. We can work up to the fancy stuff later if you want." With the saleswoman's patient guidance, Carla soon found herself with a selection of comfortable bras and panties. As she paid for her purchases, she felt a sense of completeness she'd never experienced before. Every aspect of her outward appearance now matched who she truly was inside. She emerged from the store to find Mark waiting, a bag from the food court in his hand. "Thought you might be hungry after all that shopping," he said, holding up the bag. "How about we head home and you can model your new wardrobe?" Carla nodded eagerly, her earlier nervousness replaced by excitement. As they walked back to the car, laden with bags, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not just for the physical transformation, but for having a friend like Mark who supported her through this journey. The drive home was filled with comfortable chatter, Carla's new voice becoming more natural to her ears with each word. As they pulled up to their apartment building, a thought struck her. "Mark," she said suddenly, "what are we going to tell the neighbors? Or your family when they visit?" Mark paused, key in the ignition. "Well," he said slowly, "I suppose we tell them the truth. Or as much of it as you're comfortable sharing. This is who you are now, Carla. Anyone who truly cares about you will understand and accept that." Carla nodded, touched by his unwavering support. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I don't know how I would have gotten through today without you." Mark smiled, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "That's what friends are for. Now, come on, let's get inside and see how all these new clothes look on you." As they gathered their bags and headed up to the apartment, Carla felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but for the first time in her life, she felt truly, completely herself. Whatever came next, she was ready to face it, as the woman she had always known herself to be. Inside the apartment, Carla couldn't contain her excitement. She rushed to her room, arms full of shopping bags, eager to try on her new clothes again. Mark chuckled as he watched her go, shaking his head fondly at her enthusiasm. "I'll order us some pizza," he called after her. "Take your time." In her room, Carla carefully laid out her new purchases on the bed. She ran her fingers over the soft fabrics, still hardly believing this was real. With a deep breath, she began to change. She slipped on a pair of the new jeans and a soft, flowing blouse in a deep green that brought out the flecks of color in her eyes. The fabric settled against her skin, fitting perfectly. Carla turned to look in the mirror and gasped softly. The person staring back at her was a stranger, yet intimately familiar. Her long hair cascaded over her shoulders, framing a face that was undeniably feminine. For the first time in her life, Carla felt truly beautiful. A knock at the door startled her from her reverie. "Carla?" Mark's voice came through the wood. "Pizza's here when you're ready." "Coming," Carla called back, her new voice still surprising her with its melodic quality. She gave herself one last look in the mirror, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. With a deep breath, she opened the door and stepped out. Mark was setting out plates on the coffee table, but he looked up when she entered. His eyes widened slightly, a smile spreading across his face. "Wow," he said softly. "Carla, you look amazing." Carla felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Thanks," she murmured, tucking another strand of hair behind her ear nervously. "It feels right." Mark nodded, gesturing for her to sit. "I can see that." "You seem more comfortable already." As they settled on the couch, the familiar scent of pepperoni pizza filling the air, Carla felt a surge of affection for her friend. "Mark," she said seriously, "I can't thank you enough for today, for being so understanding and supportive." Mark waved off her thanks, but his expression was warm. "That's what friends are for, Carla. I'm just glad you're happy." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the reality of the day's events settling over them. As Carla reached for her second slice, a thought occurred to her. "Mark," she said slowly, "what happens now? I mean, with work and my family and everything?" Mark set down his pizza, his expression turning serious. "Well," he said, "that's really up to you. How do you want to handle it?" Carla bit her lip, considering. I think I want to be open about it," she said finally. "I've spent so long hiding who I really am. I don't want to do that anymore." Mark nodded approvingly. "I think that's brave," he said. "And I'll be right there with you, whatever you need." Carla felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by his unwavering support. "Thank you," she whispered. They spent the rest of the evening planning. Carla would need to legally change her name and gender marker, a process that promised to be complex but necessary. They discussed how to approach her job at the garage, weighing the pros and cons of staying versus looking for new employment. As the night wore on, Carla felt a mix of excitement and apprehension about the future. There would be challenges ahead, she knew. Not everyone would be as accepting as Mark. But for the first time in her life, she felt ready to face those challenges as her true self. When she finally retired to her room for the night, Carla paused at her dresser. She opened the top drawer, pulling out the small, empty pill bottle, the vessel that had contained the catalyst for her transformation. She turned it over in her hands, marveling at how such a small thing could change her life so dramatically. With a smile, she placed the bottle on her dresser. It would serve as a reminder of this day, of the moment she finally became who she was always meant to be. As Carla settled into bed, wearing a soft new nightgown, she felt a profound sense of peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new joys. For the first time, she was excited to face the future as her true, authentic self. She closed her eyes, a smile on her lips, and drifted off to sleep. In her dreams, she saw endless possibilities stretching out before her, a life lived honestly, openly, and true to herself. It was everything she had ever wanted, and now, finally, it was within her reach. The next morning, Carla woke to sunlight streaming through her window. For a moment, she lay still, eyes closed, wondering if it had all been a dream. Then she felt the soft silk of her nightgown against her skin, the tickle of long hair on her neck, and she knew it was real. She sat up slowly, stretching her new body. Everything felt different, lighter, softer, more aligned with her inner self. Carla couldn't help the smile that spread across her face as she padded to the bathroom. The face in the mirror was still a bit of a shock, but a welcome one. She ran her fingers through her long hair, marveling at the silky texture. As she went through her morning routine, she found herself having to adjust to her new body, reaching too far for things, misjudging her new center of gravity. But each little mishap only made her giggle with joy. After showering, an experience that was both familiar and entirely new, Carla stood before her closet. The new clothes they'd bought yesterday hung neatly, a rainbow of possibilities. She chose a pair of dark wash jeans and a soft sweater in a pale blue that brought out her eyes. As she dressed, Carla couldn't help but marvel at how right it felt. The clothes fit perfectly, accentuating her new curves in a way that made her feel beautiful and confident. When she emerged from her room, she found Mark in the kitchen, cooking breakfast. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air. "Morning," Mark said, glancing up from the stove. He did a double take, a grin spreading across his face. "Wow, Carla, you look great." Carla felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Thanks," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "It still feels a bit surreal." Mark nodded understandingly. "I bet. Coffee." As they sat down to breakfast, the reality of the day ahead settled over them. Today was the day Carla would begin the process of legally changing her name and gender marker. It was also the day she planned to call her boss at the garage and explain her situation. "Nervous?" Mark asked, noticing her picking at her food. Carla nodded, letting out a shaky breath. "Terrified," she admitted. What if they don't understand? What if I lose my job?" Mark reached across the table, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "Then we'll deal with it," he said firmly. "Remember, you have rights, and you have me. We'll get through this together." Carla felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by his support. "Thank you," she whispered. After breakfast, they sat down at the computer to begin the process of legally changing Carla's name and gender marker. It was a complex process involving multiple forms and a lot of legal jargon. But with Mark's help, Carla felt more confident navigating it. As they worked, Carla couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement building. Each form filled out, each box ticked, was another step towards making her true self official in the eyes of the law. Finally, after what felt like hours, they had completed all the necessary paperwork. Carla sat back, letting out a long breath. "That's it?" she asked, hardly daring to believe it. Mark nodded, a smile on his face. "That's it for now. We'll need to mail these in and wait for processing. But yeah, you've done it, Carla." A wave of emotion washed over her. Carla buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Mark moved to her side, wrapping an arm around her. "Hey, it's okay," he said softly. "You did it. I'm so proud of you." Carla looked up, wiping her eyes. I never thought I'd get here," she said. "It feels so real now." Mark squeezed her shoulder. "It is real. This is who you are, Carla, and I'm honored to be here with you for it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the magnitude of the moment settling over them. Finally, Carla took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "I think I'm ready to call my boss now." Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.